Woke activists are teaching people how not to call the police. Ben Shapiro gets caught on a hot mic. And Ron DeSantis is giving $1,000 to first responders. I'm William Hall, and this is The William Hall Show. Alright, welcome back to the show. So let's go ahead and jump right into this really quick here. So Facebook and their oversight board, I guess, is kind of like this supposed to be independent of Facebook kind of committee that makes decisions on people that they ban and other types of decisions like that, has now announced that they are upholding their decision to suspend Trump's account on both Facebook and Instagram. Now, this shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody that actually knows Facebook is Facebook. They're extremely biased. They didn't have a really good reason to ban him in the first place. So they said in a statement, this is from Facebook's oversight board, that they found that two posts by Mr. Trump on January 6th severely violated Facebook's community standards and Instagram's community guidelines, claiming that phrases like, "We love you, you're very special," "Great Patriots," and "Remember this day forever" had violated Facebook's rules prohibiting praise to or support of people engaged in violence. Once again, if you're actually listening to these statements there, you're probably wondering to yourself, what's so violent about those? What's so bad that Facebook had to get rid of these statements off of the platform and ban the president of the United States at the time? Well, it was all about the fact that they just didn't like him or what he said. It didn't matter if it was just something as simple as, "You guys are great patriots." It didn't matter to them. All they wanted to do is get rid of him no matter what. Facebook is indeed trying, at least in this situation, attempting to avoid responsibility because they're using this independent company here just like they use independent fact checkers. I mean, we've seen those before where they were doing their own moderations and everything, and then people started complaining. So they said, "Oh, well, it's these independent guys. If you want to point fingers over there." Of course, even those independent fact checkers are still biased because Project Veritas actually had several people, these whistleblowers, come out and expose those companies even as well, that they were just a third-party company that Facebook brought in to do their fact checking, and they were deleting and moderating stuff that were pro-Trump as well. It didn't really even matter that it was just a simple separate company. And this is the same situation where this oversight board is still biased as well. And they made a longer statement about it, but it's honestly irrelevant. They're not going to bring Trump back as long as they have anything to say about it, because they don't want him on the platform. The ultimate goal is to make sure that not only Trump, but anybody associated with Trump, any of even Donald Trump Jr. as well, which has also seen a lot of suppression on Instagram as well, they're going to make sure that no matter what, these people are not able to have a platform on the website, plain and simple. And we have to look at this as well, because in other news, Donald Trump actually has launched his own website. So this is donaldjtrump.com/desk. That's the new kind of landing page, if you want to call it that, for Trump at this point. So no one's able to engage on any posts at this point on this site. It's just some of the press releases he was doing, but it's just statuses directly from him. And they're just going to be put in a kind of a newsfeed. It looks more like a blog, honestly. It looks like a blog, but there's no way to comment or engage with any of the posts there. Now, I don't know if this is going to be his ultimate new platform, the new social media platform he's been talking about. It's kind of unsure at this point. It may be that new platform. It may be something else entirely. But what I do know is that at least we have sort of a landing page for something so that we can actually get direct updates from Trump. So I think it'll take some time to get this going, but what they really need to do, what Trump's team really needs to be focusing on right now, is getting Trump back in the main space, getting this site, whatever social site they need, going up and running. Put a ton of money into it. I think that Trump has the best capability of launching something like this. I mean, we recently saw Mike Lindell. He launched the frankspeech.com website. I mean, within a day, not even within a day, within a few hours, the site basically just turned into a landing page for his live streams. I mean, that's not what was promised. That's not what was there. They were asking for people's phone numbers, and that they were going to send an invite out to get people to sign up for the site, but that never happened. Never got a text or anything about an invite, so I don't know why. So they've collected a bunch of phone numbers now. Why did that happen? I have no idea. And then, of course, if you go to the site right now, there's no social media site whatsoever. Who knows? The point is that if it wasn't ready, why are they launching it? I don't know. It just seems a bit ridiculous with that one too. So if anybody has the actual capability of really launching a site and making it a big deal, I think it's Trump. Honestly, I really do think that it's him, but he needs to put the money and the time into this so that we can make sure that this is a good site that's actually done well this time, that actually launches when it says it's going to launch, that we can actually go to actually get free speech. That would be really good. So in this other story here, you have woke activists now that are pushing for the abolishing of police. They're pushing for defunding the police. But now what we're seeing is this new move where they're saying, we're not going to call the police at all, and we're going to tell you not to call the police. So it's this new thing where they're trying to just not rely on police officers whatsoever to do their job. And there's this whole article going through this, but first there was a shorter kind of video where they brought up a few different alternatives to calling the police, as they are saying it is. And the first one was to create a safety plan. Second one was writing down what makes you happy, letting people shoplift, smelling and tasting things, massaging yourself. Now, if those sound pretty stupid, you're right in line there, because this isn't going to do anything. Letting people shoplift is still a crime. And I know, and I think a lot of these people would be like, well, it's not hurting you, right? I mean, it's just some guy stealing a bunch of stuff in the store. Why would that hurt you? Well, here's the problem. It does hurt you because it hurts the business. And when businesses have an uptick in people that are shoplifting, they have to recoup those costs somewhere. That's either going to turn into them paying employees less. Oh, well, you don't want that. You want $15 minimum wage. I forgot about that, right? And then on top of that, they raise the prices of goods in the store to make up the cost. That's plain and simply what it is. We see this oftentimes when we're talking about basic economics in poor neighborhoods. This has been brought up over and over where they say that there's a poor tax, where if you go to low income neighborhoods, oftentimes they're paying more money for other things in these stores because they are in a low economic place. And you would think, okay, people are looking at that situation and they're looking at the, say, just a gas station, for example, and they're seeing that their prices are much higher than the much more wealthy or middle class neighborhood that's a few miles away. Why is that the case? Why are the prices higher in the poor neighborhood? And it's because they have to deal with stuff like this: shoplifting, people that are breaking into the store, people that are just in the sense of what's going on. That's why these things happen. The fact that they sell less products overall, considering the fact that people in that neighborhood are poor anyway. So there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration here. And I think when we're looking at these alternatives to police, there is no good alternative to policing. There never will be. It is the best system that we have, and there's a good reason why. And I'll go through this article and we'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. So they have this article, and the literal title of the article is "What to Do Instead of Calling the Police." So this gets crazy. So let's go through these points. So point number one that they make is know your neighbors and your community, because this is apparently going to solve all of the problems, of course. So they go in and say, for example, this is a quote from the article, for example, one recent analysis of 911 calls across 8 cities in the country found that 23 to 39% were low priority or non-urgent issues like noise complaints. If neighbors know each other, they can talk a lot of these issues out together rather than bringing in outside authorities. If you'd like a neighbor to turn music down so children can sleep, for example, I found that often people are more open to that kind of thing if we know each other already. So basically what they're saying is, let's be a better community. Let's introduce ourselves. Let's have a little icebreaker with everybody in the community coming together. And when something happens, we'll just talk to them and it'll be perfectly fine. No, nothing can go wrong here. So as I mentioned before on the show, I was a 911 operator for almost 2 years. My dad was a police officer for 26 years. When they're talking about these 911 calls, I know what they're talking about. I know what they're dealing with. Okay, now they're saying in here that 23 to 39% of calls were low priority. Let's stop there for a second. Low priority is anything, because at least with the sheriff's department that I was a part of, we have priority 1 and priority 2 calls. Priority 2 calls were anything that did not warrant a lights and sirens response. A police officer basically rushing to the scene as fast as possible. Typically we would say the low priority responses could be 45 minutes of a wait time instead of immediately having the cops there as fast as possible. So, but don't get me wrong, most calls are low priority. That's actually a fact. Most calls are not something where police officers are rushing to the scene, lights and sirens, because emergencies are in progress situations. Even if somebody said, like if there's a call that we got and somebody said, my husband just beat me. Okay. Like, let's just say, for example, they're like, my husband beat me. I'm injured and blah, blah, blah. Well, a police officer call, they're probably going to send EMS too. But we have to keep in mind when you're looking at that situation that the first call, the question that I would ask that person is the boyfriend, husband, your significant other, are they still there? Are you still in danger of them? And they might say, no, they actually left like 5 hours ago, or this incident actually happened yesterday and I'm reporting it today. Well, guess what? That's a low priority response. Do you see what I'm saying? Because the situation isn't ongoing. It's not likely to change. It happened a few hours ago. It happened yesterday. The guy's nowhere in the area. If he's still there, of course, then boom, yes. First response, you're going lights and sirens as fast as you can. So when they're talking about low priority here, it's not the same thing as a noise complaint. And that's where they're getting this wrong. They're saying it's non-urgent issues like noise complaints. No, that's not the case. Those are two very, very different things. We're having worked in a sheriff's office, by the way, during the night shift. So if anybody was getting the noise complaints, it's typically at night. I would have seen them. I would have seen them happen. I've taken those calls. They don't happen that often, believe it or not. They really don't. And what you're talking about, actually, the most noise complaints we typically get are on July the 4th when people are shooting off a bunch of fireworks and people think that guns are being shot because apparently they can't compute what day it is that this is actually occurring on. But the point is that they are misrepresenting this low priority thing by making it assume that it's just a noise complaint. What's the big deal? They're not actually that popular when we're talking about noise complaints. So then they go on and they say that and being involved in your community is about more than getting along with people. It can also mean making sure that the people in your neighborhood have their needs met. A community can prevent a lot of things like theft if people have what they need. Generally, people steal things because they need things and can't otherwise access them. What? Really? So you're telling me that people only steal things that they need? Is that really where we're going with this? Because I'm pretty sure people steal things because they want it, not because they need it. And what you're literally talking about this. I mean, think about how many people steal Amazon packages every day. I know we have to know that thousands and thousands of packages are literally stolen off the doorsteps a day. People that don't even know what's in the packages. And you're going to tell me that they needed whatever that miscellaneous mystery box is? How does that make sense? I mean, what about the other things? I mean, people steal because they want stuff. It very rarely is it the fact that people are just like, oh man, I'm going to die if I don't like eat this thing and I'm just going to steal some food or whatever. That's not what's happening here. People steal because they're bad actors. I'm sure maybe some people are like, oh, well, they may need something. But I mean, really, who is breaking into a house because of something they need? They don't even know what's in the house. They're hoping to find some money in there, probably because they don't even have a job in the first place. I mean, this has nothing to do with a need. It has to do with a want, and that want is basically what's driving them to commit a crime, which is still a crime regardless. You don't just, how are you supposed to fix that situation in your community? You're just going to find a bunch of people that somehow can just have everything that they need. You're just going to share and create a little Chaz chop zone of communism where everybody shares each other's wealth. How are you expecting that to work? And that doesn't solve the problem of people from outside the community coming into your community if it's not gated, not protected, not patrolled, and taking your stuff. How does that work? What if they're coming from somewhere else? A lot of times they are. Why would somebody that lives in their own community terrorize their own community? Typically it is an outsider. But they're not paying attention to that either. So they go on to say in point 2 that you must learn about local mental health and medical resources. So it says that police often decide to call, or people often decide to call police because someone in their area appears to be intoxicated or in some way dealing with some type of mental health crisis. In one 2017 study in Camden, New York, for example, found that 7% of calls were related to some mental or behavioral health need. Once again, this is very vague, but I've taken these calls. I've done it long enough to know, okay? When they're saying that these 7% of calls were related to some mental or behavioral health need, what we're saying is, and what we have to keep in mind, is that many people call 911 on themselves. When there was a clear mental health situation, I can assure you that 90% of the time that I have handled calls over the course on 911 doing the job myself, that there are actually people that call for themselves to be Baker acted, whether they feel like they are suicidal, or maybe it's another situation where they are just worried about their own safety or something like that. They oftentimes call the police on themselves. It's not always a situation where somebody's calling the police on them, because typically what happens is that it's not just like, oh, there's some weird guy talking on the side of the road. I mean, how many times have you driven down the road and you've seen maybe some homeless person talking to themselves? You calling the police on them? I highly doubt that you would, because they're not doing anything. They're just talking to themselves, and you can realize that there's a mental health crisis there. But why does that warrant a police response unless they're committing a crime? But that's a detail they want to leave out, because they need to be committing a crime. They have to be doing something that isn't right. Now, we did get a lot of calls for suspicious people, which would be typically somebody walking around the neighborhood that looks like they're drunk. They clearly don't belong there. They don't live there. And typically just neighbors calling around just saying, hey, look, I'm concerned because this person's just worrying me. They have every right to call the police. They have every right to do that. And sure, they could maybe, I don't know, find somebody in their neighborhood to talk to that person, of course, too. But if it's some of these people are just not worried about trying to call and involve all their neighbors in this, they want to deal with somebody where it's their job to do that. And it goes on and it says that, but police are not trained to address mental health or substance use issues, and calling them can lead to a person in crisis being arrested or jailed. Once again, police, first of all, are trained in these mental health issues. I have been trained in those mental health issues. They teach it in 911, they teach it for dispatch, and they teach it for all of the things in the sheriff's department. Everybody is supposed to be able to identify these things, whether it's over their phone or when the police officer gets there on site. So this is a blatant lie saying that police are not trained to do this. You would think it would be a massive oversight if they weren't. And it would be, because they are trained in this. And it's saying that it could lead to them being arrested or jailed. Well, once again, oftentimes these people are asking to be Baker acted. Oftentimes these people are committing crimes first to warrant that being the case. So it is what it is. But they are trained in this nonetheless. So the article goes on to say, instead of police, a growing number of cities have crisis response teams composed of social workers, counselors, and other trained to help people with mental health or substance problems. In Eugene, Oregon, for example, a program called Cahoots sends trained specialists to help people deal with crises involving mental health or substance abuse and refers them to further services or a treatment. So once again, this type of issue is not going to be solved by these people that are just mental health experts. Like, many times these mental health experts or mental health people that you're dealing with on the streets that are committing a crime are a danger to themselves or someone else. Hence why they're typically arrested oftentimes. You put these people in this situation where normally a cop would respond, and let me tell you something right now. There's going to be social workers and these types of people that are going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt. Police classify as a high-risk job. Are you willing to put that same high risk on these social workers? Are those social workers willing to deal with the situations that police officers have to deal with? Because I don't think that they're going to like that very much. So they make this other statement here, and this is the next topic, talking about where it says, take a community approach to stopping violence and protecting people. So it says, for example, the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collection has developed an idea of pods. Your pod, the group writes, is made up of people that you would call on if violence or harm or abuse happen to you, or the people that you would call on if you want support in something like taking accountability for violence, harm, or abuse that you've done, or if you've witnessed violence, or if someone you care about was being violent or being abused. Quick question about this whole pod, right? How many of those people are willing to die for you? Serious question. How many of these people in this little pod of yours are willing to die, to lay their lives on the line to save yours? People forget what risk cops have to face when they decide to walk out of that door. People forget that cops are held to a significantly higher standard than a normal everyday citizen. You don't get to just talk about some little pod of some friends and people you know that you can call on an emergency contact list on your cell phone. When stuff is getting real in your life, when you really need the police, the last thing you're going to be wanting to deal with is somebody that has no expertise on the situation. That's the issue that you're going to deal with these types of solutions. They're not solutions at all. And the other thing that they go on to say is that they say that the collective has a worksheet to help people map their pod. So they know in advance who they can call on if they or someone they know is in danger. Identifying people in your life who you can rely on can help if you face abuse or harm. So then it goes on to say, I've felt a lot safer in situations where things have been kind of sketchy at home, knowing that I have a friend that I can go stay with if the need be. At the same time, it shouldn't be survivors' sole responsibility to figure out how to keep themselves safe. We have responsibilities towards our community and ensure that people don't harm each other. So what you have here is this, first of all, this part where they're talking about this situation where they're saying they have it feels a lot better knowing that they have a friend that they could stay with if the need be. Look, how is that going to help you if you really need the police? I mean, the police can can mitigate a situation and you still may need to stay with that friend. How is just having a place to stay all of a sudden going to mitigate the problem that's happening on hand right now? That's the problem that you have here. What if your community is the problem? You hear all of this talk about protect your community. Everybody in the community needs to do their part to make sure that everybody is safe and nice and getting along. But seriously, what if you live in a really bad crime-stricken community? What are you supposed to do then? Are we really talking about trying to be perfectly okay with just everybody in the community all of a sudden? What if you live in one of these areas that are not great? I mean, fancy that, but the fact is that when you live in a nice neighborhood, you don't really have much crime. When you live in a bad neighborhood, you have a lot more crime. It's it makes sense. That's how things work. It's nothing new. The other thing is that people have no idea what police officers do on a daily basis. I do. Okay? I do. Let's take a few situations, for example, of which none of these people in these pods and your friends and things like that are going to help you at all. Lost children. This happens all the time. Police officers are often getting these calls. I've gotten these calls before where they have to ask themselves, okay, are they in danger to themselves? There's rules, procedures, processes that go into that. What age are they? Do they have a mental illness? Is there something like that? Police are going to be much more effective at finding a lost child than some guy in your community. Plain and simple. The other thing is that the police officers have a record of the past calls, so they can see where's the child gone before. They can actually go out and disperse and have all officers in an entire county be on the lookout for your lost child. What's that one dude in your apartment or your community going to do about it if they completely left? Absolutely nothing is what's going to happen. What about car accidents? What about hit and run? What are you going to do? I mean, let's keep in mind that insurance still looks to what the police officer says happened in the accident on the determination that they make when they get there as how your insurance is going to pay or not pay or pay who and how they're going to do their claims and everything. It's all going to be based off of the official reports from the cops, not the guy in your community. You can keep passing that stuff along as much as you want, but that's not how this works. So what about a violent dog or an animal that's in your community? A dog that's biting people. What's going to happen then? You're going to call your friend to maybe get rabies or who knows what else this dog has, to maybe get bitten by the dog himself. Do you think he's going to come out for that? Probably not. Then you might be saying, okay, well, send animal control. Animal control is always on a massive about 2 to 3 day delay many times. Every time that there's a human life in danger, even if it's from another animal, officers are the first ones and the only ones to really respond to that. If somebody gets bitten, then they have EMS, and even EMS won't arrive on site right away because there's a violent dog. So how do you expect that to work with a bunch of people in your community? And even something as simple and as stupid as my child won't go to school today. I've gotten plenty of those calls over my time working on 911. And although I don't agree with parents basically calling the police to have their kid or convince them to have their kid go to school, we have to keep in mind too that the reason why the parents are doing that is because it's the last resort. The police are oftentimes the last kind of line of authority that they need to convince their child of something, to do something, or whatever else it may be, to file a police report. No community report in your community is going to be held up as valid in court. Nobody cares what your friend wrote down the day that you did something. There's no procedure, there's no paperwork, there's nothing that's done. What about restraining orders? Are your friends gonna make sure that some guy stays away from you 24/7 out of the blue? Are they gonna arrest that violent boyfriend from coming back to your house? I mean, think about these situations and ask yourself, how in the world do you plan on getting rid of police when you don't even have a good solution for any of these? It's real easy to just chalk it up to the selective things this article likes to fit into a little box, but that's not what policing is. It doesn't fit in a box. Situations change. There's such a broad thing. We had more than 100 different codes of types of calls we could get and how we could classify those that we had to memorize. You can't chalk up policing down to just some simple petty level crimes of, oh, they're just shoplifting. Oh, they're just stealing something from your house. Let's just provide for everyone here in our little communist utopia and assume that nothing can go wrong. Keep it up, folks, because at some point, somebody's going to be dealing with a real situation, or one of these situations I just mentioned. You're going to have to call the police. And if you don't, you're only shooting yourself in the foot. So just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon where you can donate directly to the show. And if you're listening to this show on Apple Podcasts, please remember to leave a review. Ben Shapiro, the conservative political commentator that's been around for many years at this point, gets caught on a hot mic.
We are indeed done here today. I have an appointment I got to get to. Thank you, guys. It's great to see you, and I will see you here next time. One thing on that episode, I said pansexualism is weird. Can we just cut that?
I can ask.
That'd be great.
Before it's reposted?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could,
It's like a 10-second bit. It's about halfway through. It's just I'm pansexual. I'm like, that's kind of weird. Like, you like everything? Like, just like...
You want to get rid of that.
Yeah, it's just, like, it's nothing, but
so
don't
when
make it
you,
something.
when you
I mean, it is weird that you are attracted to every single thing.
Yeah.
Wait, when
no
you finish,
taste at all.
I thought that was a funny bit.
It is a funny bit, but that's why I'll get boycotted.
All right, so this is an interesting clip here. So this is in reference to the whole Demi Lovato thing being pansexual, and he was making a joke about it, just saying it's just crazy how she's attracted to everything, and he wants that entire section cut out. He wants it cut out, presumably because he's worried about losing a sponsor or something like that, but he doesn't want to get boycotted, is what he says in there. So, my take on this is quite simple, and I've talked about this on my earlier shows as well. Ben Shapiro, along with pretty much everybody, except I think Michael Knowles at the Daily Wire, and there's other people out there that are like this, are the conservative elites. They themselves view everyone as lesser than them. And that's the thing, is that they don't really stand up for many of the things that you would expect for people to talk about. I mean, we talk about politicians being rhinos all the time, but we never look to people that are in our current, commentary scene as being rhinos either. These people that don't have a backbone to talk about anything. I mean, let's take a second here to go down a little bit of memory lane with Shapiro. I mean, he's never really been a Trump supporter. Yet people didn't care. I mean, they were willing to literally hang any other conservative commentator out to dry if they didn't get behind Trump at some point. But he's still not behind him now, and he wasn't then. And yet people still, in droves, go crazy over this guy. He also was one of the people, like I've mentioned before, that is and has attacked other conservatives or has done it in a very, just a disrespectful way. So Elijah Schaffer and him were going back and forth on Twitter a while back, where Elijah Schaffer was talking about the transmission rates of COVID-19, basically saying that 95% of people that get COVID-19 aren't going to die anyways, and those 5% are like, they're actually people with comorbidities and these things like that. And Shapiro basically said, you know what, get the vaccine anyways, don't bother paying attention to those things. You're wrong, Elijah Schaffer. But it's the way that he did this, because he didn't retweet with a comment. He put up a photo, like it actually just screen capped his tweet and posted it with the comment. In other words, like to say, you're not worthy of my retweet. You're not worthy of being acknowledged by me in the full sense of that. I will not let people easily click on your actual post to get access to it. I'm just going to screenshot it, throw it up, and make a comment on it. So even the way that he's treated other conservatives has been disrespectful. The thing is that I think that him specifically, he thinks he's too good for everyone. And that's the problem that I have with all of these people that are out there right now, is that, you know, they want everybody to kind of capitulate to what they're doing. They're only concerned about themselves, no one else. And this situation just kind of proves my point even further. I mean, this isn't new to me. Ever since I've gotten into politics, I've seen the way that he's behaved in these types of situations. I've seen the things that he said. I mean, this guy never gets censored on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. And the fact is that I don't understand why nobody's looked at this. His channel's fully monetized today, right now. Why is that probably the case when he's been out there in the biggest sense of that? I mean, I've gotten videos deleted. I don't think he's ever gotten a video deleted. And the main reason why is because he's saying everything that YouTube is perfectly fine with him saying. They're not going to talk about the election. They're not going to talk about election integrity. They're not going to talk about any of that stuff. They're not going to mention the name of anybody that they deem to be unfit for their mouth. They're not going to talk about Laura Loomer. They're not going to talk about certain congressmen and women that they don't fully align with. Unless you are in the pool of their bubble, you will be excluded. And that's the way that they see all of this stuff. If you're not in that bubble, you don't exist. They've never been censored. And the same goes for many other conservatives out there as well that are in the political commentary scene. Some of them have not been censored either. And to be honest with you, what really bothers me about all of this is that none of this is going to even matter. I mean, really, none of it's going to really matter that much. Because, you know, the fact is that Ben Shapiro right now could say, you know what, I'm a Democrat and I hate all conservatives. And he'd still garner 50,000 people listening to his podcast. He still would do it because people don't care. It's more about the actual, I guess, the recognizability of his name than it is about what he's actually saying. Nobody cares what he's saying that much. Nobody cares about what he's talking about with the Demi Lovato situation in this clip because they're still going to eat it up. Every single thing that he does, they're going to eat it up because they don't know any better. Instead of actually trying to lift up people that are talking about the truth, that are bringing these things up, they'd rather lift up people that have been towing the same safe line for the past, 5-6 years. So it doesn't, to me, even really matter at this point either. And like I said, I still respect the guy in the general sense of, you know, what he's done for conservatism. I'm not sitting here trying to just completely slam somebody because I can and whatever. But we have to be real here. Like a lot of these people, if you really are concerned about big tech censorship, isn't it kind of weird that none of these people really talk about that? Isn't it kind of weird that none of them have been censored at all? I mean, pay attention to these things because I've been saying this from day one of this show that these people are doing something that is allowing for them to talk about big tech censorship when they want to, but never get censored themselves. I mean, the most I've heard him talk about is, oh, we didn't get as much viewership on Facebook. I mean, what? Like, some people are having their entire Facebook pages taken down entirely. Look at Trump, like as I reported earlier in this show. So either way, I'm not surprised by any of this stuff at all. I'm surprised at the people that are surprised by it. And more people need to be paying attention to what's going on there and the people that they're consuming content from. Who are these people? Why are they never getting censored? Why are they continuously being sucked up to in every way? Might be a good reason behind that. Maybe a pretty good reason. So Ron DeSantis announced recently that he's going to be giving a $1,000 bonus to all first responders, which of course is a great idea. So there's this statement here that he's going to give these $1,000 bonuses to Florida's 174,000 first responders. So there's 49,405 sworn law enforcement officers, 40,732 EMTs, and 35,811 firefighters, and 33,185 paramedics in Florida. All of them getting a $1,000 bonus on top of this. Now, he went on to say, supporting our law enforcement and first responders has been a top priority for my administration, and it has never been more important than over the last year. As a state, we are grateful for their continued service in our communities. This one-time bonus is a small token of appreciation, but we can never go far enough to express our gratitude for their selflessness. And he's absolutely correct. As somebody that was a first responder of sorts doing 911 dispatching as well, it's such a difficult job to do and to constantly have to be on the side of just being for the people. and constantly having to deal with people shouting in your face, shouting at you about stuff, not caring about you whatsoever, and you're just doing nothing but servicing the community. That's all you're doing. And yet, if you look in the news, they're demonizing you. They're demonizing the police. They're demonizing everybody that's involved in something with law enforcement, and forgetting the amount of ridiculous work that these people put in with these 12-hour shifts, learning so much and dealing with so many things on a daily basis that they forget to appreciate the fact that they're even there when they need them most. It's the one thing that people ignore. They think that police are just some people doing a job that have a handgun, and that's it. They forget that they are willing to die for you. They will kill, the sworn in part is that they will kill themselves to save your life. And nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about that. There's, if there's anything that I would think that most people would want to be critical of police about, is if we saw, and we haven't seen, but if we saw the situation where somebody died when a police had the opportunity to intervene, sacrificing themselves. To me, that would mean that the police did something wrong. But in this situation, we're seeing something entirely different. So speaking of police, there's this new information that we have now about the Chauvin lawyer, where he's now filed an appeal finally for a new trial. And he was alleging jury misconduct. So former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin filed an appeal for a new trial Tuesday after he was convicted last month of murdering George Floyd. His attorney, Eric Nelson, filed a request alleging that pretrial publicly affected Chauvin's right to a fair trial. Nelson's filing also accuses Minnesota state prosecutors of committing pervasive, prejudicial, prosecutorial misconduct that also affected Chauvin's right to receive a fair trial, which of course he's correct in this situation. The filing also requested an order to impeach the verdict on the grounds that the jury committed misconduct, felt threatened or intimidated, felt race-based pressure during the proceedings, and or failed to adhere to instructions during deliberations. And to stack on top of that, outright lied about what they were doing as a juror. So if you remember, there was this guy that I was just reporting on, that Brandon Mitchell guy, juror number 52, that came out and literally just said, hey, look, man, I was on that jury to affect change. That's what I was there to do. And he lied to the lied to the judge, he lied to the attorneys, and literally told them that he basically didn't have any idea what was going on with the George Floyd situation, that he wasn't involved in any of the protests. Come to find out, the guy had the shirt on. I mean, he's a member of BLM, basically. And no problem whatsoever. They let him on, and now he's coming out speaking about it. So I think that guy may have kind of really screwed this whole thing up now, and actually might wind up with this situation actually working in favor of Derek Chauvin, because you're not supposed to do that. And honestly, I think even if you move the location, if you sequester the jury and you do this, that, and the other, it's almost impossible to get a fair trial these days, because the internet is so powerful. It really is. Like, everybody heard about George Floyd. So it's really difficult to have a fair trial when people come into it with a kind of predetermined thought process of everything. And right now, we'll see what happens, but I'm assuming that it will work for them. If we have any semblance of a justice system left, it will work. But you can't have BLM sitting on the jury and expect to have a fair trial. That doesn't make sense whatsoever. So Alyssa Milano kind of always has been this very radical left-wing person, and has said just a bunch of questionable woke things online before, gets destroyed in this TikTok video by this black woman.
For those of us who are not black men, imagine watching the news and seeing how people...
Imagine being a black man and being told by some white lady with a microphone that you and the criminal on TV are one and the same because you look alike. Imagine being told by society that white people can be all that they can be, but you as a black man, the content of your character is completely irrelevant. You are the color of your skin, and that is all you will ever be. Imagine being told you can't figure out how to vote because of the color of your skin. Socioeconomics affects everyone, but apparently you're not as smart as the poorest white person. Lady, I don't want to hate you. I'm a 90s kid. I grew up with you, so I know you're very talented. I understand your heart is in the right place, but you are everything you preach against. You're not helping. You're making things worse. You're causing more division. You're causing more fear. Statistically speaking, I am more likely to be shot and killed by my black elderly neighbor across the street than the cop who patrols my neighborhood. Statistically speaking, homicide by cop is very rare, but people like you find power in fear, so you keep it front page news. You don't have to be a white supremacist. You can be better.
Wow. Alyssa Milano's views make her a white supremacist. I mean, we've been saying this for the longest period of time, by the way. This is nothing new, but I mean, it is a reality, because you have to think that if you are a person like her that believes that black people cannot obey the law, that they just can't, they have to commit crimes at a much higher rate than any other race in the United States, even though they're only 13% of the population. If you believe that they just can't help themselves but to consistently commit crimes, that makes you a racist. It does. It doesn't matter if you mean well by those statements and think you're so woke by saying it. That's what she feels. That they are not able to have any type of personal responsibility enough to not do those things. People often talk about this, but people forget that the Democrats are the party of the KKK. They literally are. They were the ones that were pushing segregation back then. They were the ones that were trying to maintain segregation laws back then. Jim Crow, you name it. That was the Democrats. And everybody wants to say, but they're so different now. They've changed. They've taken on a new path. The parties have switched, you see. It's the Democrats that are now the good people and the conservatives that are the party of the KKK. Is that really what's going on? No, it's not. And the reason why is one need look at the very foundation of what it means to be a Democrat. Race is everything. Race is everything fueled them back then during the KKK, saying that race is so important. Black people are lesser than white people. So therefore, we must segregate our societies, and everybody must be beholden to their race as the single most important thing about them. It determines where you sit on a bus. It determines what restaurants you go to. It determines what water fountain you use in the bathrooms you go to. That's what we were told. Now, they're telling us the same thing. Race is everything. And in this situation, they're saying black people need their own space because otherwise they'll be oppressed by white people. They can't do well with being around other races of people at the same time. Race is everything. Let's make sure that we have affirmative action in schools because they can't get high enough test scores on their own. They can't get into a college without the government assistance. They can't get a job and live a normal life. They can't get an education. They can't stop committing crimes. But we're so woke, we're so progressive because race is everything. It's the same party. They've been doing the same thing for 100 years. Let's not pretend as if all of a sudden that it's different all of a sudden. It isn't. The only party that's actually going to be any different, and the only way they change is by saying race doesn't matter. Let's judge people on individuals. Oh, wait, that's a conservative. That's not a Democrat at all. So that's where you have these problems crop up with these people. And they'll never be able to understand it, I don't think. But at least good on this black woman here for dismantling her in such a just casual way. Just point by point by point. Just these are all the things that are wrong with what you're saying. You're not able to, you mean well, and I know you mean well, but you're ultimately doing more harm than good. So great to see her talking about this stuff, and hopefully we see more people come out and make these videos like this, talking and debunking the ridiculous amount of things that happen to it with what these celebrities say. Alyssa Milano, I hope she watches this. I doubt she will, but I hope she watches it because she needs to see this. She does. Every Democrat needs to see these things, and we need more black people stepping up and saying, no, we're not going to accept this. These lies that blatantly ignore the reality on the ground, that blatantly ignore the numbers. We're not going to accept it. So that's all I have for you on this show. I thank you for watching or listening to this one, and I will see you on the next one.